Greetings. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today I'm in conversation with Dr. Joseph Kanyekanye, the Executive Chairman of Alliance Holdings. If you enjoy this conversation, remember to subscribe, to like, and to share. Let's get down to some work. Dr. Joseph Kanyekanye, welcome to In Conversation with Trevor.
Thank you very much for having me here.
What a pleasure having you. As we were chatting, you reminded me that you are actually cousins with Justin Machibaya, who's sat there before, and that you actually a Machibaya. Talk to us why you are not a Machibaya but Kanyekanye. What happened? What's the story behind that?
It's humorous. It was really an accident in the sense that Justin's father and my father are blood brothers.
Wow.
But it so happened that our grandfather used to be a very good commercial farmer. So what would happen is that the adjoining communal areas would come to the farm when they're in trouble, when they needed firewood or some food. So what he would do, you give a little bit of everything. And they then gave him a nickname, Kanyekanye, meaning he gives a little bit of everything. So when my father went to school, survey during that time, when he got there, because my grandfather was well known because of his generosity. So he simply says, my name is Joseph. He says, okay, so Joseph Kanyekanye. And that's, so we have a second generation of Joseph Kanyekanye. But in reality, we are Machibayas, yeah. So,
and Kanyekanye means mix up
mixing.
things.
So you get a bit of grain, a bit of this, and then you would help the community because he was also a religious man.
And I'm seeing in your life, in your career, there's a bit of gold, there's a bit of timber, there's a bit of consultants and financial services.
Yes.
But we will get to that. But
Okay.
I think the Kanyekanye name is taking a life of its own in your own life.
That's true.
But let's start by going to Allied Timbers Holdings. When you're Group CEO, 2008 to 2015. Before we actually get into what you did there, it's what you were accused of. Where I think there's a lot of lessons there. I know I don't like scandals. I like more for us to extricate the lessons from there. So you got accused of having unlawfully given discounts, unauthorized allowances, diverted money which was for VAT, and this amount is supposed to have been $10 million US dollars. Talk to me about, in the initial instance, when this allegation is made that you have done, what goes through your mind?
Well, I was disappointed because when you look at it, Allied Timbers came from Forest Company of Zimbabwe. I actually formed operationalized in 2001, and then it grew into a bigger company subsidiary. Then it became Allied Timbers Holding. I was then promoted to Group CEO. What shocked me was that we had audited financials. We had AGMs on time. I came from a commercial private sector before going to run a state enterprise. So basically, all the corporate governance issues we ticked with AGMs, we paid dividends. It was profitable. And I think there was a changeover, I think around 2013-14, there was a changeover in government in terms of the ministers under which the company operated under. And I think what became clear was that we got in a new board of directors that came through. I got the sense that some of them were not really experienced in terms of what should actually happen in a board. So we went through Institute of Directors training for quite of them. They didn't like it, but I thought it was prudent to do that. But I was a little bit naive at that time because I believed in goodness of men, that people are objective and what have you. So what then happened is that the board that I had worked with, which was led by Livingstone Gwada, was momentarily dismissed just overnight over the television, which was quite shocking because we had meetings before where they were sure they were doing a good job. So when that happened, I went on for 2 years without a board of directors. And then when these new guys come in, came in, the notion of what they wanted to do. And obviously, my stance was, look, the truth cannot be put under the carpet. You can look at everything, check everything. So they did audits while I was still there, salaries and everything. They came out clean. The government also did their own, through the Auditor General, on remuneration. It was a clean audit done by a separate company. So I then detected that after the 2 years with the new board came through, we basically had some serious...
So 2 years you didn't have a board?
No, I didn't have a board. I operated without a board. And that's where the problem started. Because
so the person who dissolves the board, the minister who deserves the board,
yes,
stays for 2 years without appointing a board.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. You would think that with corporate governance and the way we've moved now, something like that would not happen. But look,
it happened.
It happened.
It happened.
Yeah.
And you're saying during that period, you think that's where things went wrong?
Because what happens is when you don't have a board, it basically then means that you are operating as group CEO. The things, the budgets, everything still needs to be sorted out. Certain procurement guidelines needs to be done. But then in effect, you are now working with the ministry directly. And what it then calls on you is that you are now forced to deal with them directly on day-to-day issues and on other tactical plans that the business has to do.
Right.
So you now get a group of people that are now accustomed to getting inside the company. And then when a new board comes in, you then have this misalignment where people were used to say, when you want approvals, they are involved. Now you've got a board. And then that sort of hazy setup led to all sorts of things. And I think when the new board came in, obviously, ordinarily, you and I would understand that whether it's a state-owned company, if it's a parastatal, it runs with Enabling Act. I was running a private limited company. So in essence, the moment you put a board, I report strictly to the board. And I think there is where the problem started, because when the board came through, I stopped taking instructions from the other side on the basis that that is the only way I've been accustomed. I work with...
Meanwhile, you're upsetting some people.
Precisely. And that appeared like you have been intransigent, you have been...
insubordinate.
Insubordinate, yeah. But in reality, that is the essence of how we should have operated. And I then realized at that point that, look, I think at this juncture, it's time to let go. It's something that I started.
It's time for you to go.
To go. So I then put a proposal.
Talk to me about what made you think it was time to let go. What were the points? What were the pain points? What was the discomfort?
Number one was the caliber of the board. Yeah.
Okay.
I had one person in the board who had worked under me as a personal officer at a very, very low rank. And he was of the view that he should be the vote chairperson on HR and whatever. But you see, when we've worked with certain people at that low level, you know them, and you know this is not what it was. Because let me remind you, when I started this company, I was the only employee in 2001. Joseph Kanyekanye, first employee of Forest Company of Zimbabwe. All the other 4,500 employees, I recruited them, formed a company with assets, with a good, solid balance sheet, with good performance. And then I felt like it's like you are a carpenter. You go to the house that you build, then you find people are adding little things there that probably cause the roof to collapse. You get worried.
Yeah.
And my view was, this is the time to move.
So that's the first one.
Yeah.
Any other thing?
The other thing was, obviously, one of the issues when you run a state-owned company, you don't want anyone to get an impression that they can come in and get what they want, as if they are... Because my take is that they are shareholders' representatives for you. And
they are not
else.
shareholders,
they
but
they
represent the shareholders.
Yeah. But I think we had a discussion with some of them to say we are the shareholders. And me being what I am, I'm also an academic in the sense I took time to correct them to say, no, you are the shareholders' representatives. Stay in. I'll meet you at the AG. I'll meet you when we do our AGMs. I'll deal with the board. If you have issues with whatever, deal with the board chairperson. I will do the work that I'm doing and I report to the board chairperson. And that created an issue because I was not accustomed to that. So the increased interference in the business, wherein you would find in some cases, because we're doing international marketing, We're exporting to Mayotte, to the UK, to Botswana, all over the region and so forth. You would find someone who is an official, tells you they've gone into Botswana and this is what they would want to do. Then in one case...
I'm laughing, sorry.
Yeah, no, but this is reality.
Wow.
So in some cases you go in and you find someone says, because I'm a board member, I've gone to an operation in, say, Francistown, and he calls people and says, I want to talk to them about that. And I would pick up a phone and say, sir, with the greatest respect, that's not your duty. It's not authorized. Or someone will say, I've gone to this thing, I'm looking at the operations, can you pay hotel accommodation? Says, no, I won't. I won't do that.
So my pushback on that, Joseph, would be to say, so you have two options. You stay and you fight. Okay? You're fighting for the taxpayer, you're fighting for the shareholder. Or you, like you decided to walk away. Talk to me about what I'm trying to say to you, that maybe you and I, people like you and I, have a responsibility to stay in there and fight. What's your pushback on that?
All right. I'll explain it in two ways. The first one, just going a little bit back, I did not choose to go away then. I thought I could change the system.
Right.
What triggered my eventual decision to go is that I came from a trip with a subsidiary in Botswana, found my FD complaining, almost crying, to say I've been forced to do a certain transaction where money was used for an activity which was not authorized. I then said, look, I have to fight for my subordinate. So unfortunately, by the time I came back, she had decided to resign. Yeah. She immediately said she's leaving. Then I went to the new board that was there to say, no, this is not how things are done. I will not tolerate this sort of issue. And I think at that point, I realized it was a very difficult environment. I then said, look, I think I need to leave. The other thing also, I had a bit of a problem at a personal level. My wife had cancer during that period. So I then took a position to say, look, she's on stage 4 cancer. Should I really fight this? Where really should my priorities be? So I then say to them, look, I need to go.
She passed on, didn't she?
Yes, she passed on, yeah. She eventually passed on, yeah. But I think at that point, I'm happy I did that because I managed to spend time really away from all this madness and focused on trying to see that the last days were okay.
Why we're spending so much time on this issue is that this is an important thing. This is what happens. My reading of this space in our country over the past 30 years is that this happens all the time. CEOs get accused of parastatals. The allegations don't stand. Their names are tarnished. What makes it difficult for you is that the allegations followed a KPMG forensic audit report. That elevates the allegations to a different space. Talk to me about that.
Okay, so here's what happens. When you do audit in the normal sense, there is what is called a draft audit. You give it to the people that you're auditing to respond to it. So here is the reality of it. What is considered as a KPMG audit is not a final audit report. I think they did whatever they did, and I never got a chance to be able to explain my story. So basically, you don't use an initial audit before there are responses. I can tell you some of the things that were there which were funny. The bulk of the allegations were basically discount. And I ask you to Botswana. In Botswana, we had one buyer. Guess who was the buyer? A subsidiary of Allied Timbers Holdings called Ultim Timbers Pty Limited. So if I'm discounted to my subsidiary, where is the fraud in all that? So it means it's within the family. So I think that is lost because, in a sense, it's a wholly owned subsidiary by Allied Timbers Holdings, which was there. So in essence, that's how we're selling into Botswana. So someone talks about credit and what have you. It's a credit. It's an interdivisional issue. And this was approved by the board. Then you talk of discounts and whatever. Look, I formed this company. One of the things that I did coming from the private sector was to ensure that there were procedures and guidelines that guided purchasing everything, basically. Because one of the things that I also did was to have this company certified by SGS in terms of procedures and so forth. So in other words, you had an issue where to the extent that you are selling products, a 5% discount is allowable for export markets. And this does not require board approval. It's a standard operating procedure, which is
It's a
usually
management issue.
Precisely, and this is initiated by the marketing director, and you just look at it to say, does it make sense, and so forth. So, in a sense,
so the KPMG, rather the board, then absolves you by issuing a statement that they don't think that the allegations will stand the scrutiny of any law, and the allegations are withdrawn. But it leaves a sour taste in the mouth. Talk to me about that.
You and I, Trevor, we have one thing in common. I have a belief in God. I have a belief in the feeling that sometimes bad things happen, but evil never triumphs over good in the long term. So my take of it is that there are people that probably work along those lines. There's not much I can do about them, but yeah. The issue is, if you remember, I did do a press conference before I resigned. I said history will show that I'm right. And history has shown I was totally right. I've not been charged, I've not been in prison for anything that was alleged. I knew it was a lot of nonsense. These are, you see, when you bring caliber of board members that are politicians, and in my board there were serious politicians in the board, then basically you undo the value proposition that you expect out of a commercial entity. Unfortunately, this is what happened. And there's also another saying in Shona where you say, sometimes you make it cross the river. So in a manner of speaking, I'm glad that happened in some sense, because I managed to get out of that madness and then establish better things.
Look at what you've established.
Precisely,
amazing, isn't it? But I want to go to, we're going to take a break here, but viewers at home, don't go away. When we come back, I want to go to the issue that you raised, the appointment of boards, the persecution of CEO of Parastatals, none of whom, as far as I can remember, have been found guilty and been imprisoned for the allegations made by this board. So when we come back, viewers, that's where we're going to go. Don't go away. See you on the other side.
Look at most of the boards that are there now. One of the things that strikes you is that for most of them, you say, who is the chairman? And it's no one that has not achieved anything.
Welcome back to our conversation with Dr. Joseph Kanyekanye, the Executive Chairman of Alliance Holdings. So when we took the break, Joseph, you had already hinted on a subject that's very important, I think. For the past 40-something years, we've seen this movie before, so many times. We've seen this movie so many times, what you went through, which is why I thought we should spend a lot of time there. We have boards that run parastatals, which are full of politicians, appointed by politicians, without the competence for what the parastatal is supposed to be doing. There's interference in that kind of stuff. There is a conclusion that these parastatals become wasteful because they're not being run properly. And I have this proposition that why don't we've learned the lesson over the past 40 years. It doesn't work having parastatals, having this kind of interference from politicians. Why shouldn't we press the stop button and say, can we relook at the way in which board compositions for parastatals are done? We have expert people. We get the private sector involved in terms of nominating people that should go onto the boards and so forth. What's your pushback on that?
I would agree with you that that's probably the way to do. But having said so, there are one or two exceptions in some boards where even within a setup, depending on the caliber of the ministers concerned, you could have a situation where professional people, usually people who are employed elsewhere, they tend to do a better job than those who are not employed anyway. They come in, they execute their professional issue. Like I indicated, my first 15 years when I started Allied Timbers, Livingston Gwata was the chairman, and I have absolutely no complaint with that board. It was perfect. They did their job, and it worked well. But you are right, the majority of cases is that there's a cabinet reshuffle, a new minister comes in, and the usual thing is, if that's basically what the industry is, instead of focusing on the outcome of the results, the usual thing is we are restructuring. Sometimes there's no need for restructuring. We're having a new CEO, a new whatever. And that causes a lot of institutional memory is lost, a lot of confusion is caused, and depending on the ministers, and I think with the greatest, there are some ministers, in terms of their background, they were just teachers at a primary school, a secondary school, a headmaster. Suddenly he's in charge of all these corporate entities, and he picks his cronies, and the whole thing comes through. But what we have seen is that, look at CSC, it's gone downhill. Look at our railway system. You remember Mabena and this professional team, gone. Look at most of the boards that are there now. One of the things that strikes you is that for most of them, you say, who is the chairman? And it's no one that has not achieved anything. It's analogous to a military setup where you appoint a platoon commander, someone who is just graduated from and then he takes you to battle. In my view, for a commercial board, you should never have a chairperson for a commercial entity for someone who has not shown that they've done, either as a CEO, a chairman somewhere, there's something that they've done. But what we have is names and people coming through. But what it does is that it erodes what is expected in terms of performance and so forth. And we're still, in most of these boards, what you are finding out now is that no one goes back to say, what is the new board doing? Has it improved? And I will tell you this. If a student at the University of Zimbabwe were to do maybe a dissertation for their MBA on the performance of boards, literally as you go further on, it's clear that most of them is deteriorated. You remember,
slowly
parastatals used to account for 60% of what we call the industry. I became president of CZI when I was running a state-owned company. It just shows that the parastatals then were basically calling the shots. What has happened now, virtually most of them have been converted into little inefficient empires where there is nothing that is going on. Their contribution is almost negligible. They've simply, whether it's CSC, they've simply gone a trend where at the end of it, there's nothing to it. So the lessons learned, I like the lessons learned. For me, the lesson learned that is number one. I think the appointment of boards must follow a particular path where it's not dependent on a particular minister. Because I think politicians, being politicians, you know, they can do sort of things that you and I may not look at it, which is outside objective evidence. So that needs to be sorted out. The other issue is that if you look at South Africa, in some cases, there are appointments, but there is you could have a first level Institute of Directors, for example, do that, and then the government simply adopts recommendations coming from there. Because what we are seeing now is that it's like you have an institution like Ungucheni, and in the board you can have 5 lawyers in the board, and no one knows about the treatment protocols for the patients and what have you. So we have a lot of that in Zimbabwe
it's
currently.
Jobs for the boys,
Precisely.
Isn't it? Jobs for the boys, the minister's boys, the president's boys, and so forth. There's another thing there which I want you to respond to. You were not found guilty. You were cleared. Reward Kangai is currently out. He was never found guilty. But people's names have been tarnished. People's reputations have been tarnished. And in the public mind, to a lot of people, these are criminals. Agabamari, you know? Talk to me about that bit of it.
Well, the point is, I remember talking to my lawyer to say, should I then sue for defamation? And he says, by the time you are done with your legal fees, you're lucky if you get $5,000, but your fees will be much more than that. You're poorer. So, and then you create a lot of stories around that area, so it never goes away. So sometimes just let it go.
Do you think yours has gone away by your lived experience?
My fortunate bit is that I worked in an industry where people that I worked with know me very well. That I never did any of those things. So to a large extent, the irony of it is that when I left Allied, I got consultancy arrangements with my competitor companies. I worked for one of the largest timber company in South Africa as a consultant. They wanted me as a CEO, but I preferred to be in Zimbabwe. And I've worked, for example, for PG Timbers, Border Timbers, Water Consultants Agreement. So everyone knew that all this is just the politicking that goes with someone going out.
The parastatals, unfortunately, become poison chalice to the extent that I would say any normal professional out there, the moment somebody says you should be the CEO of this parastatals, run as fast as you can from this thing. It's a poison chalice. What's your pushback?
For me, you see, a little bit from background would explain why I have that affinity for them. I grew up in Sakuva. Sakuva is the ghetto's ghetto, if you understand what I mean.
Yes.
I was just uprooted from there by virtue of a scholarship through the government of Zimbabwe. So my entire academic career and profession was because I managed to ride on a policy that came from the government of Zimbabwe, which led me to becoming, to go in territories that were run by whites during that time and eventually become the CEO. So from that perspective, you always have this feeling that I must give back a little bit because I was sent overseas, I traveled the world, I was exposed to everything. I came back to my country. And the issue of coming back, three of us went in, but one guy never came back. But we came back. We were so imbued with this patriotic zeal and national interest to say, for what was happening to me, if perhaps no one had come to me, I'd probably be heading goats in Bikita right now with my third wife trying to borrow $10 from the shop owner or something of that nature. So I always have this feeling that whether it was through an act of God, whether it was my destiny, the mere fact that the government saw fit to get someone like me who was not politically connected in any manner, train me and allow me to lead the largest timber company in Zimbabwe, I have this sense that I am there to serve as well, besides the commercial interest. So to that extent, the question you asked earlier on, if not me, who? If not now, when? So this is where I would simply say, for example, I sit in the advisory board for Ministry of Industry and Commerce. It was inaugurated this week. So I've never been shy to run away, notwithstanding the sort of whipping that has come through. We say in
no,
Shona,
so go ahead. You say in Shona?
We say in Shona, Mushawa Baba, if there are problems there, you don't run away.
No, you don't.
You just have to fix it while you're in there. It may be difficult.
You know, I think for me that's the thing. I hear you 100%. Nika inovakwa never. But things are broken. The system will chew you up and spit you out. Yes, which is why some of us, when I was appointed to PAC, I said, absolutely, because I want to save the country. But when you get in there and you find that the kitchen is so rotten, you know, you can't stand the rot. The smell is something else. But I agree with you. It's our country.
Yes.
We should do what we can to make it work. So you get kicked out and you do amazing things at Allied Timbers Holdings. Sorry, not Allied Timbers Holdings, I apologize, sorry. As Alliance Holdings Executive Chairman, let me correct that. You get kicked out, as God would have it, from 2015, you are running Alliance Holdings as the Executive Chairman. You have Alliance Timbers, you have Alliance Gold, Marathon Tires, Pace Advisory Services. This is a big enterprise that you've built. Talk to me about the pain points of building what you've built.
Obviously, the background that we're coming from.
Let's go there.
Yeah, so you go in and you say, this is what I want to do. So let's talk about Pace Advisor. Pace Advisor is using our collective experience, where my partners, Dr. Mbire, General Nyambuya, we basically say we have a lot to give. He has experience as a cabinet minister. Mbire is a chartered accountant. He is a trained accountant. I'm coming from industry. I have knowledge in manufacturing, and even my PhD, I'm focusing on finance and what have you. So basically, with friends that know you for what you are, it's easy. So this is how PACE comes about. And we do structures.
And PACE has done some big deals.
Yeah,
you've done Mikkels.
We've done Mikkels, we've done Lobels.
You've done RBZ, you've done Lobels indeed. Talk to me about how tough that has been or how easy that has been.
It's, for me, if I look at Mikkels, it was easy because the chairman, John Moxon, basically had faith in us. I don't know where he got his faith from. This is at the heart of all these problems. But John says, Joe, I want you to do this thing. In fact, I nearly ended up working for them, but look, it's not the way I had wanted. I was a little bit anti-working for anyone after
So you
that.
recovered their debt.
We recovered
from
their
the government.
debt.
You restructured.
Yeah.
You helped them get an investor. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so essentially, without breaching confidential
Confidentiality,
agreements,
yeah.
they had an outstanding issue. We had to do an evaluation, get it sorted out, agreed and sorted it out, and eventually it was done. I think confidentiality issues prevent me from going into details.
Right.
But the bottom line is that I see the Mikos now, I'm happy. Yeah, the Mikos then was having some bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
But what we have now, by all standards, I think Mr. Moxon has done very well. Yeah.
And Marathon Tires, what was the thinking behind forming Marathon Tires? It looks a strange animal within what you're doing.
Marathon, I got it because within East Africa, they were demerging. Yeah, I think they were focusing on just the core sugar. Remember the old East Africa?
Yes.
They had a whole lot of everything. They had Red Sea, they all over, more like what Chambati had with TA Holdings, where they're doing fridges, furniture, everything. So I think the idea was then to focus on the core. And I think this business came through, and I took advantage of it.
Are you enjoying it?
Yeah.
Is it bearing fruit?
Right now, it's a little bit tricky because the tire business, there's been a lot of influx of tires, which are cheaper than retrading.
So you're battling to compete price-wise?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I think it's a challenge which you find in manufacturing.
Yeah.
If you look at the latest manufacturing survey report, literally manufacturing has regressed to a point where when you talk of production and whatever, it's largely mining and agriculture. You remember manufacturing used to be 20% of GDP.
Yes.
I think it's less than 6% of GDP now. So there's been a downward trend.
Informalization of trade, isn't it? People are smuggling stuff in and selling these things. Am I right or overstepping?
That could be part of the problem, but I think the other problem really for manufacturing has been we don't have competitiveness. So when you look at any manufacturing sector, now if you talk to the sector leaders, they will tell you there are a lot of other issues like virtually every regulatory authority and what have you, they are levying fees and what have you, to a point where we become very uncompetitive. So the main reason why there's a decline. So you ask yourself what happened to cabs. Cabs is away. It had capacity to do all these drugs, but it's no longer there. I think it's competitiveness. When you then weigh this, when we open the markets, and I can say that wearing another hat is former CZI president, I think our understanding of globalization was a little bit naive, because we went the full hog of being very frank and honest and opening borders without protecting our industry. And we then took the word protection as a horrible thing. But I will tell you, if you look at the US, they basically are fighting to keep Hawaii off. If you look at South Africa, they were exporting cars into Zimbabwe, they did a 40% rebate. So we took this bookish approach to say, it's open, everyone will act like that. And I think, was it yesterday when I was talking to Nigel Chanakira pointed out to me that, look, in the pharmaceutical industry, which has started very well, in South Africa, you can't bring pharmaceuticals into South Africa unless if you do it by air. It looks like it's an innocent provision, but in effect,
They are protecting
their industry. So in this particular case, we have not protected our industries. They've gone down one by one.
What should we do?
Well,
because essentially, we have deindustrialized.
Yes.
We've become a wholesale supermarket for China, for South Africa. What should we do, as briefly as possible?
Okay. What we should do, and we had a meeting with the minister just 2 days ago, Minister Love, and I think he's got everything on course. The approach that we seem to be having consensus on is to say, let's go sector by sector. In a sector, you have a value chain. Let's first of all address issues that are cited by the sector in terms of arresting decline or improving performance. That's one. Then the other thing that we've done, we've already reclassified sectors in the economy so that even some sectors that are not there are put in. And what government will probably go, I think this will depend on the Honorable Minister. He may choose to go the route where basically you say in each particular sector, which are the easy projects that we can do, and then these are then promoted to the extent that if it's a law that needs to be changed, let it be changed. If it's an issue that we need to protect it by rebates or other things, let it be done. If they have to have subsidized electricity, let it be done. Because at the end of the day, that's what is done. Then the other one, which is a quick win, you notice what has happened, notwithstanding whatever we're saying about Zimbabwe now. I think on agriculture and mining, the current government has done exceptionally well. But what has not happened is that while there's been an increase in terms of production in mining, which should have led logically to an increase in terms of manufacturing or product supply, nothing has happened. So the minister, our honorable minister for industry, has an opportunity to actually go and simply say, all these platinum mines, all these coal mines and everything, you guys, you have to add value. Beneficiation must happen. Let's have charters to say for each sector, we will have 100% beneficiation.
Do you think that's going to happen?
For me, it's the only logical way to cause industrialization because we can't be exporting raw chrome like what we're doing.
Because you're taking me to, we can't be exporting raw chrome. We can't be exporting raw lithium.
Yes.
We can't be exporting coal bed methane.
Yes.
These are big minerals with tremendous value addition if we could do that to other industries. Do you think, what does the private sector need to do for that to happen, for government to fully embrace this, that here's a commodity, but we can do A, B, C, D that creates jobs, that enables us to be players in the export market? Talk to me about that.
Right, we've already started. I'm happy with the current minister. He has embraced that. Hopefully it will work out. So on two fronts, through CZI, I'm chairman of a committee on investment and so forth. But at the same time, we sit, I think 4 presidents of CZI sit in the advisory council for the minister. So we're supporting, let anyone doubt that.
That's good.
So we're supporting him because we feel if we don't, then basically we don't address what is going on. So here's what will be done. The private sector should come up with these particular projects that will cause us to get to a point where the minister can then pronounce on the basis of practical projects on the ground to say we are going to get to maybe whether it's 20% or 25% of GDP as manufacturing. He can actually do that. But the other thing is we also want, I know when you guys went to the advisory committee, you remember when the president came on power, he said he's going to anchor, he's open for business. He talked about industry, manufacturing, he talked about agriculture and mining. When the president was in Russia recently,
just now,
you notice he talked about agriculture and mining. No industry. In my view,
that's the third leg that's important.
That's important because mining combined with industry causes manufacturing. So let me give you an example.
Sure.
My home area in Bikita. In my home area in Bikita, that's where the lithium is coming from. Now, currently people are thinking of lithium minerals and exporting them. But you and I, Trevor, we have the foresight to actually see that we could actually create batteries. The next
lithium batteries.
Yeah, if you look at Professor Mtambara when he was talking about the fourth revolution, wherein we are talking of IA, we are talking of blockchain technology and so forth. But one of the things that's coming out is that if there is an improvement in technology where we can actually improve on battery technology, and lithium is the core of that throughout the whole world, we as Zimbabwe are in a position where we should be driving everything in. More like the way we drove, if you look at tobacco and cotton and what have you, there is potential to do that.
There is potential to do that indeed. I mean, I would have wanted us to dig into Alliance Gold, pun is intended, and Alliance Timbers, but we won't. We're going to take a break here. When we come back, you were president of CZI, and I want to put you on the spot, Joseph. Did you speak the truth to government?
I did.
Or were you timid? You told the government what they wanted to hear? So at home, don't go away. We'll put Joseph on the spot. Was he timid as president of CZI, or he spoke truth to power? See you on the other side.
All the time, we end up printing money. And all the time, the currency eventually becomes worthless.
Welcome to our conversation with Dr. Joseph Kanyekanye, the Executive Chairman of Alliance Holdings. So you've already given us an indication. You're from Bikita. You were born in
Gweru.
Gweru. Talk to me about the beginnings, your formative years. Which schools did you go to? And
Okay. So for my primary school, I attended Senga Primary in Gweru. Then I then moved to Fletcher. It was the logical choice, Fletcher High School. After my O-levels, my father was transferred in terms of employment to go into Kwekwe and eventually into Mutare. So we had to follow. Eventually, I ended up doing my A-levels in Mutare, at Mutare Boys High School. And in another conversation, we can talk about this is the time when the whites were resisting blacks coming through. So I did the Mutare Boys High School. From there, I then went to University of Wales, where I studied forestry wood science, specialized on wood composites. When I came back, I worked for FAO, and then while I was here,
Food and Agricultural Organization.
Yes, yeah. When I was here, I then started an MBA. I think there was the only one MBA done at University of Zimbabwe. I remember Honorable Chinamasa was one of the students. Yeah. So we after the MBA, I then did while working now as CEO of Allied Timbers, I then did a doctorate degree focusing on financial valuations.
But you started on the floor, which means you worked in a sawmill.
Yes.
Managing a sawmill.
Yes.
But the question for me is, where did the love for wood and forestry come from?
Mutare Boys High School, without any doubt. So at Mutare
How? Yes.
Yeah, Mutare Boys School, it's surrounded by trees. And the motto is Ex Modibus Roba, from the mountains. So if I were to sing the school song to you, my voice is horrible. Mutare Boys High School song is probably the best school song you can ever have in the world, because it talks about the trees, the mountains, and how they inspire us. So we would sing I was a prefect and head of hostel then. So we would sing the school song, and you see these mountains. I didn't know what their names were, but they were the pines. I now know them. I can identify the Pinus patula, Tida, Eliota, and what have you. So that imbued a sense of an understanding of nature and trees from me. And also where I lived in Sakuva, the factories that were closed were Bota Timbers, walking distance. There was Mutare Board and Paper Mills. And they would allow us to go in as youngsters to go and see what was happening. So at one point I thought industry for me, it's growing trees, processing them into paper or into boards. And that was my real first love. And I think I never got out of that. You know what they say about timber? If you don't like timber, here's the saying that we put. If you don't go to school, you don't use paper, which comes from timber. If you don't go to school, the desk, you may never have exposure to the desk, which is made of wood. If you don't own a house, you may have a house, and the house needs timber for the roof and everything else. But if you miss all that, we'll suddenly bury you in a coffin made of wood. So you can't, it's pervasive. People don't see it, but there's timber, the environment. And lately, because of the carbon credit trading after the Kyoto Protocol, the world now, is this something that I would want to push for Zimbabwe? Rather than growing tobacco is certainly a thing that will go away sooner or later. I mean, they've been banned and so forth. Carbon credits here offer an opportunity to generate more revenue in Zimbabwe than what you get out of tobacco without destroying the environment, conserving the environment. There's the Kariba Red project, which basically is doing about 230 million over 30 years. There are a lot of projects that can be done, just planting trees, even in urban areas. And basically, if you can show that you are sequestering carbon dioxide, and there's a scientific measure to ascertain that, you can actually get money out of that.
That's fascinating and very important within the climate change space that we're in. Does our government get that?
I think so. I have tried to articulate that, and I think the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, they are coming into that now. There's a current movement towards ensuring that these CDM projects or carbon trading comes into being. And I can tell you last week, I was dealing with companies that want to sell carbon credits, and I'm trying to approach timber companies and aligned entities to see what can be done. But this is easy money between you and me. It's you are conserving nature, you are helping the world, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. Hopefully, in some form or the other.
I love your passion. So you go to the University of Wales, not the University of Zimbabwe, and you go to study
wood science, BSc wood science.
Why did you go to Wales?
Well, it was a scholarship. It so happened that it was offered in a field that I was familiar with by my exposure to Mutare. If I'd lived in Guero, I probably would for Zimbabwe. I would have become a mechanical engineer like most of my friends did. So I went to Wales. I enjoyed it, and I've never looked
back.
I've never looked back. If I have to come back in another life, just keep me close to the forest. I'll be happy.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. Talk to me. I mean, you've been very successful, and I want you to help us. What principles do you lead by?
My first one is inspiration from my father. My father used to use a term to say, I refuse. So there were 3 of us siblings. If we were to go from school and we don't come number 1 to 10, my father was a very quiet man. He would say, Mukanya, which is my totem, Mukanya, I refuse, you can't be number 2. And that was it. No elaboration. So in my view, I have this inner thing that if your mind says, I want to do something, I always say, even a very, very big overweight man, if his mind says, I want to jump the fence, you will jump over. So that is one thing that is ingrained in me and my siblings.
I see you've lost weight.
Yes, yeah. So that's part of what is happening. So you that in spirit, that is the main driver. Because you look at there are 3 of us in the family. My brother is an engineer. My sister is also a doctorate based in South Africa. But that's what inspired us, our father. The other principles are obviously the Catholic background. We are Catholics. Generally, as Catholics, we believe that you must do right by your parents. You must take care of the others. You must also have some charity and so forth. So you find even with CZI president, I introduced this idea to say, guys, at the end of the year, we make money, we drive Land Cruisers and what have you. Let's go and do something. So you find in Bulawayo, we went in, we did tanks at King George and whatever, orphanages, charities and so forth. We've done a lot, although you don't publicize that because part of it is inside you.
You shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the other issues, obviously, is part of my training. I've got an Anglo-Saxon perspective to business. It has to be correct. It has to use objective evidence. And I have to speak out the truth no matter what. So if you work with me, I'll tell you the truth. You may not like it, but in my view, I come from a school of thought that saying the truth and using objective evidence does not make me your enemy. It makes you a best friend. And that's what I normally believe in.
And do you, as an individual, how do you lead yourself? Do you have a routine? Do you have a habit? Talk to us about that. Because for you to be successful, there must be something that you're doing in terms of leading yourself. And I want you to help our viewers there. How do you lead yourself?
Well, I don't know whether, the way it works for me is that I believe in hard work. And hard work for me involves doing what is done during working hours and also ensuring that besides reading books and whatever, I go onto the ground. So if you look at, like, for example, Fridays, I go to the mine, the gold mine. I also go into the mine underground, come up and see what is happening. I think it gives you a refreshing mind on reality versus theoretical models that you work with. I also believe that there must be time for the family in a particular week. I've got sons that are studying mostly overseas, and I think I ensure that if it's about sports function and whatever, they take precedence. Yeah. So I may not be available, and I will tell you because we are going to watch basketball. Incidentally, my first 2 kids were excellent in basketball. They had colors in basketball. So I would go to the extent of even sponsoring tournaments and uniforms and what have you. Then, of course, the other thing is that I also have a feeling about the family, our family unit as such. Because I've got a mother who is a widow. She has been there for quite some time. So you give everyone some bit of space for social interactions and friends within reason and so forth. But in essence, I also mentor other people that I've worked with. I think if you go in the timber industry in Mutare, I would say up to 80% of anyone who is in timber industry, if they don't mention that I didn't mentor them, I'll be shocked.
Wow.
Yeah.
So CZI, you were president of CZI. What years? Remind me.
2009 to 2011.
I am very critical of organized industry, particularly the CZI as is currently structured and ZNCC and so forth. Perhaps not so more of ZNCC. But I think what you did indicate that at some point where you're saying, look at the leadership of companies like Coal Storage Commission, railways at the time of Alvord Mabena. The quality of people there were amazing people. I find that our private sector leaders are timid. That CZI, I know they'll be very angry with me, that they've become praise singers, backing vocals for the government, not speaking truth to power. Did you speak truth to power? And if you did, in what areas did you speak truth to power?
I'll answer a question. First of all, I agree with you. That's shocking, but I agree with you. I did speak truth to power. I think in all cases that we had, whether it was the then president of Zimbabwe, I used to have breakfast meeting with the vice president and Prime Minister Tsvangirai. I would say to you guys, to them, to say, look, compromise. We need to compromise for our country to move forward. This winner takes all and everyone is bad. That doesn't work in business, in churches, and everywhere else. We need to think about the national interests of Zimbabwe and so forth. And I think to some extent you are right. One of the problems that we've had is that whether it was deliberate or not by government, you've had these cases where, let's talk like, say, for example, let's talk about the auction system. Everyone knew what an auction system is. Even a rural lady would know an auction system. You go in, you have money, and you get a product. We had an auction system where
the price is fixed.
We put money, and not only fixed, but you give your money, and you get a product 1 month down the line.
Yeah.
So I think that is a sign of business being timid, because right from the start, if something is not working well, you should never accept half-baked bread when you can have flour or nothing.
Why are they timid? Why can't they speak out for the goodness of everybody else?
It's a combination. I wouldn't say it's largely timid. I think part of it is that government tends to appoint certain people in particular boards, and you become compromised. Let's be very honest. So you become compromised because I think we had a case of Professor Mugano, if you remember.
Yes.
Yeah. Mugano was like me. We speak out. We say the truth.
He's still speaking out,
He's
having
still
been
speaking
fired.
out, but he's no longer in any board. So eventually he got kicked out. So this is the reality of it. Whereas what I would want us to be able to do to build our country, we are the children of the revolution.
This is our country.
Yeah. So to be able to do that, we must be able to speak out without fear. We must be able to state things as they are and then move on. You understand what I mean? And I think it takes a lot of courage. I think maybe your upbringing, but my perspective...
The opposite of courage is timid. You said they are not timid. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage. And I think we need to, really, for me, this is fundamentally important, because we are where we are because the private sector is not speaking out. The private sector is not standing up to speak the truth as far as government is concerned. For the goodness of our country, patriotism to me is telling your government where they go wrong and standing up, rather than, giving excuses and behaving
and
like...
being politically correct, yeah. You are right. We've been politically correct, but in a manner, in doing so, we basically are not helping the national interest. The national interest is served by saying, if you go and take, for example, with an informal sector, that informal sector is not taxed. The reality is that while people are crying for services and what have you, the majority of people don't pay any taxes in this country. That needs to be corrected. No one no economy can survive on that. The mining deals that are coming through, there's been an increase in production, but there's not been, the taxation levels do not show that. So there's something, so we need to talk to that and address that. So in helping Minister of Finance, for example, we need to be able to say, Minister, that informal sector, we have to find a mechanism of taxing that so that you have more revenues, so that we can do a lot of work. The other thing is that when you talk of currency and whatever, everyone, you and I probably agree, that when you introduce a currency and the fiscal framework is not right, It doesn't matter who is the Minister of Finance. If there's not enough money for health, the money will have to be printed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and eventually the currency suffers. We've had successive modifications of currencies and whatever from when the Zim dollar came off around 2008, 2009, when we had multiple currencies. We've had RTGS, we've had all those permutations. And there's one fundamental thing that comes out all the time. We end up printing money, and all the time the currency eventually becomes worthless. So what we need to be able to say is that how do we avoid an issue where the minister has to print money? And a lot of it is uncomfortable, but a lot of it is that, number one, we must come together as Zimbabweans, irrespective of the political divide. Let's come together, let's work together, let's also realize...
All of us,
yeah. Including the opposition, whatever you call the opposition, all of us. And then let's talk of Zimbabwe. The national interest is number one. And when we get to that, let's get to a point where we say, before we introduce the currency, we've sorted this out. We are not having ODA like Malawi and whatever. But I'm telling you, if we can sort that one out, eventually you find that there won't be a need to reform, to print currency, because the finances of the government will be quite okay, and any currency can then be done.
You were outspoken on the hyperinflation environment that we're in. You were outspoken on price controls. Did you get any blowback on that?
Yes, I got arrested at one point, but look, it comes with the territory. I think when there was that commission, I got arrested.
How was that like?
I just got in for a weekend, came out, but it was very humbling.
That's the price of being courageous.
Precisely.
That's the price of speaking up, which some people are afraid to do.
But look, I will tell you, even when that happened, I was really never fearful that anything was going to happen to me. I thought this was a way of saying, you guys must not increase prices. But look, the bottom line is that we kept on fighting. Eventually, they were taken down. Yeah, it was a struggle and a half.
We've got to fight for the things we believe in, for the things that are good for the country, for the things that are good for our children and our grandchildren, isn't it?
That's very true. That's very true. And I think the price controls, we fought that. The GMO, I was saying, here's a country...
Can we go there?
Yeah.
GMO.
Yeah.
There is no policy clarity. When you were CZI president, you were calling for that clarity. Right now, there is no clarity. We have a contradiction whereby we're now having to import GMO maize from South Africa when we say we don't want GMO maize. Can you talk to me about that?
This is exactly the idea of our advocates. Because at the time when I was saying, you guys, when you go on the plane, you go to Senton, you say in Senton, son, all the food that you're eating is GMO food. So let's not pretend. You attend conferences there, you eat that GMO food. We're a country where there's not enough food, where productivity levels are low. These guys are using GMO. And I can tell you, Trevor, even in forest trees, it's no coincidence that we grow trees that are tall with little branches. Those are engineered products. This is the way the world is moving.
This is what science says.
Yes.
There are negatives around it, but let's understand it. Let's be science-based. Let's be objective. Let's be evidence-based. We're not doing that. Is there clarity now as far as GMO is concerned?
Well, it's not so clear, but what I can say is that with respect to the staple food like maize, which you have mentioned, because of, particularly this year, when we've got a deficit, maybe over 1.5 million tons of maize that needs to be imported, I think there's an acceptance that GMO maize may have to come through, but it's not very clear.
It's not very
clear. It's not very clear.
I say it's as clear as mud. You know, there's a lot of things I want to talk to you about, but one thing, we're going to talk books. Before you go, we go to books. You argued for a barter trade. Do you still believe in that?
Yes, I do. Let me tell you why it's that simple.
It sounds like a crazy idea to me.
It's crazy, but practical. Here's the situation. Zimbabwean companies, whether it's cabs, whether it's whatever, that have collapsed over the years, they've collapsed largely for 3 things. No foreign currencies to sustain their business, agreed? They didn't have access to money to be able to modernize their equipment. We are using UDI, manufacturing equipment. If you want to put it in a sarcastic manner, we are using an abacus when someone is using a computer.
I went to Mtare Board and Paper.
Yes,
I almost cried.
Literally
looking at that technology
there.
Yeah.
So, and I'm a paper and pulp specialist, by the way, by training. That technology, when I trained in the UK, that equipment came from England, the one that you saw. I think it was 1952 or thereabout. And when I trained in the 90s, we didn't even talk about that because it was no longer in the books. It's something that we talked about. But anyway, so the point is, so you have foreign currency, you've got a lack of competitiveness and so forth. So how do you actually achieve that? So I'm saying, let's just take state-owned companies, and you assume you want to get them to 60% the level.
Yeah.
I'm glad Mangunja has got those under Mutapa holdings and what have you, under the Mutapa fund.
Yes.
So here is the issue. Anyone who wants foreign currency comes with Zimbabwean dollars before they want foreign currency.
Yeah.
So why not have a situation where whatever machinery, and here I'm talking of critical equipment, there has to be an exclusion list, not to buy fancy things. Machinery required to refurbish industry is paid for in local currency into a non-resident transferable account, which the Chinese will then use to buy whatever they want from this country. So here's the issue. Equipment comes, it increases productivity.
I see.
The transactions are done in US dollar terms, but in effect, we are not using the US dollar. We really do not need to use the US dollar to get our machinery right. We really do not use the US dollar to get raw materials right. And who is China? China, it is the second largest economy in the world. You're talking of trillions of dollars in reserves. China, there is nothing that is manufactured in this country that is not manufactured in China. All these state enterprises, they failed to recapitalize equipment. China has got that. Look at what has happened to mining. We may not like it, but our mining has largely been driven by the Chinese. Did we go and borrow money? No. The Chinese are bringing their money and they're taking local partners.
But are they not taking the money out?
Okay, that's another issue which we need to deal with taxation.
Right, okay.
But I'm not
I
going
hear you.
holistic.
I hear you.
But I'm simply saying that if foreign currency is one of the major problems, it's not ZESA. People talk about the power and whatever. Look, even if you put power now, you remain uncompetitive if you have not done the structure. If you are using the wrong technology, you may have so many amount of power coming your way, it doesn't help. So I'm simply saying China, which has helped us on our mining, look what China has done on tobacco. Look, the Chinese right now are the largest consumers of our flue-cured tobacco. Right now, if you go into lithium and whatever, it's the Chinese companies. So I'm saying on manufacturing, let's now force them to add value addition. On this currency, let's get raw materials.
That should be easy. I mean,
Yeah.
when I read about it, I thought you were crazy. But now that you explain it, it makes sense.
Well, it's a crazy idea, but all I'm saying is if your country, our country, Trevor, is in this sort of problems that we have, and I'm ashamed that we have deindustrialized, literally we've regressed. We are now largely a producer of primary
We are
goods.
worse than we were in 1980.
Yes, that's
Industrial
true.
capacity.
Yes, definitely. I can say that without
Do we
fear.
have an industrial policy?
Yes, it's there.
Do we implement? I mean, not on paper. Do we actually have it that we're implementing it?
Look, we had a discussion 2 days ago with the minister, and I know his views,
Yeah.
but I suppose I can't paraphrase what he wants.
Sure.
Bottom line is, I think there's a new thinking, which I think the Honorable Minister for Industry is talking about as well, wherein we are saying, let's try to redo an industrial policy, which starts with the building blocks as practical projects from a sector, rather than just to put a number and say 2030 will be this and that, will be a 60 billion economy. So I think the idea now is that I think that is, it's a view which is shared by even advisors in government, like quite a number of them. So we are getting to a point where we are saying let's change how we call industrial policy, even if some are even saying should you even call it an industrial policy as well. So I think that discussion we had some 3 days ago, and I'm quite clear that we will get
For
a viable one.
For me, it ought to be, Joseph, something that says, okay, how does it talk to education? How does education contribute to that? How do tertiary institutions contribute to that? How do we ensure that the raw materials are there, the technology is there, the brain power is there? It ought to be holistic, and I don't see that happening.
But that's what is coming through. I can't say that's coming through. I'm not the minister, but I think that is the thinking that is coming through.
I love that. I love
which
it.
means you must come back to advisory again.
Tell me, you've been so successful. Is there a failure that has humbled you?
Yeah, I can cite an example. My exit from Allied, I could have managed it better with hindsight.
Okay.
Yeah, clearly, I'm a little bit wiser in terms of what would happen. I was a little bit naive in the way I managed it. We had I had also an investment which we did in Botswana. It started off well, but I think we had local partners there. It became a little bit of a problem dealing with the local partners in terms of the profile of the partner that we had. Eventually, we had to buy them out, but I think it had caused enough damage to the business.
So as far as you're concerned, that was a failure.
Yeah, that's
What lessons did you pick out from there?
Well, choose your partners correctly. Just like in any marriage, choose your partners correctly, take time, don't just go with the wind. I think that's the lesson from Botswana. For the allied thing, my view is that, in my view, I'd overstayed. I did 15 years. I formed the organization, ran it for 15 years, and I think after 10 years, I sort of wanted to move at some point. But I think if you overstay, you probably become a bit of a problem. I think there may be others who may want to go in and what have you. So I think I've learned my lesson with that, yeah.
Wonderful. We shall do books. You obviously read a lot of books, and viewers out there absolutely love books. You brought some books for us.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk to why you chose them?
My favorite is, of course, I'm a treeman, Historic Trees of Zimbabwe.
Wow.
I've gone through the over 100 or so trees that are located in the area. I think I'm left with about 3 or so. I love trees. I studied dendrology when I was doing forestry, which is identification of trees and so forth. So my view is if I find a tree that is unique.
Indigenous trees? These
both,
are... Okay.
Both indigenous trees, exotics, I can identify them by name. So when you see mukwa, when you see baobab, you say that's a baobab tree.
Yeah.
I'll call it, it's a Adonsonia digitata. So in my mind, when I studied dendrology, I had 100% score during that subject. For every assignment, my mind just clicks in terms of what tree, where is it located, and what is its origin, botanical name, and so forth.
Who wrote this book?
This was sponsored by
Kingdom Holdings.
Kingdom Holdings, yeah. But it's unique in the sense that around Harare, if you follow this book, it will take you to these trees, how they came about, what's their name, who brought them into the country, and so forth.
Are there many people who are as passionate about trees like you? In Zimbabwe?
Zimbabwe, maybe 3. I wouldn't want to mention their names.
You are a protected. You are a species that should be protected because we need to make sure that we continue to produce our indigenous trees. The other book?
This one is the one launched by Professor Mtambara. It's called Design and Analysis of Control Systems. Ordinarily, it's an engineering book, but you and I were at the launch of that book.
Yes.
I think what amazes me, Professor Mtambara comes, he's talking about the fourth revolution. And literally, for me, it's an appeal to the authorities to say, embrace this. Because despite where we are in terms of industrialization and so forth, you can actually leapfrog by using artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, to basically forget about what happened in the past and launch new industries. Yeah. Remember, there are new sectors that are coming in Zimbabwe that were never there before. And we can actually invest that education that we have, combined, it can give you a service or a product that is not there even in the current sector.
That creates jobs that didn't exist.
Exactly. Yeah. So from my view, wildlife control systems, you have objective evidence that tells you what needs to be. It can be applied even in terms of Zimbabwe as a country to say, we have had these problems about sanctions, about lack of funding, Zidera, and what have you. How do we crystallize that into a model that allows us to be globally compliant in terms of the behavior that's expected of the world and get out of the rat where we are?
For me, as you recall, when I spoke, why don't we use people like Arthur Mtambara in enhancing our capacity as a nation? Part of a think tank, part of policy formulation and so forth. We ought to use all Zimbabweans.
I totally agree.
He's one of those people that we should be using, and people like James Manyika. Your third book?
My third book is It says, I did it God's way. This is by Chief. He invited me to Nigeria. I was trying to buy lion match for myself. He used to own lion match. So he invited to Nigeria. I was impressed. I was impressed by the way he was structured, his beliefs, and how he organized himself. I spent a week in Nigeria.
And the book is called I Did It God's Way, an autobiography by Sir Chief Bode Akindele, founder of Modondola Group.
So this guy has ships, he has got his own port, he has got large companies, he was owning all the lion meat in South Africa everywhere. So he's into all these things. And
does he still own land meat?
Yes. No, the current one, I think he doesn't anymore. Okay. He was trying to dispose it, but we had a bit of we agreed on a price. After my trip, he increased the price. So I said, oh, come on. No, it won't work here.
Wow. Joseph, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I mean, I wish we had more time, but you're doing amazing things. And you're doing Kanyekanye, mixing them up, gold, advisory services, and your passion in timber. And like I said, you say there's 3 people that are passionate like you, and you know, we ought to have a legislation that protects you guys to ensure we continue to grow trees. So, my brother, thank you so much for agreeing to come on.
All right, thank you very much as well. You are doing a wonderful job. We are happy with what you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Allow me, remain sitting there. Allow me to turn over to our viewers who are all over the world. Thank you so much for your support. Remember, we are a weekly show. We come out on Mondays at 7 a.m. Central African time on YouTube. To ensure that you don't miss out on any of these quality conversations, I invite you please to subscribe, like, and share. If you subscribe, you'll get a notification every time we have one of these quality shows. We also have created a platform where all of our content sits on our website for your viewing pleasure and for your listening pleasure. So you go below this video and you'll find podcasts for your viewing. And we view all your comments, your suggestions as to who should be here, your criticisms. So keep them coming. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. Cheers to you all.